Now then, Leeds United fans, welcome back to Straight Talking Leeds, where we talk straight about Leeds United. But all that being said, let's just start off today's show by just very briefly talking about England, because obviously it's very prominent. It happened last night. We're all a little bit gutted and a little bit dejected. I can't lie, I'm very much a club man over nation, and as time's gone on, as I've got older, that's become even more and more evident. But that doesn't mean that when England are in town that I don't get massively behind the boys and I'm desperate for us to be successful. Last night we just saw a conclusion of a set of performances that basically for me didn't really change. We showed resilience, we showed guile, we showed determination, and for yesterday we probably showed some of our best performance of the whole tournament. But ultimately we weren't good enough, and we weren't good enough all the way through, and that culminated in a loss against Argentina, who are just a far better side than us. That's the way that I see it. So welcome back to Straight Talking Leeds. I wanted to get that out of the way nice and quickly. I'm gutted about last night, gutted to not be able to see England in a World Cup final at the weekend. But I'm very quickly going to move on to news about Leeds United, because they are my sole football purpose most of the time. So yeah, for me, very much club over country. Some people don't like that, but that's the way that I see it. So today we are gonna just have a catch up with anybody that comes into the chat, and thank you very much for the support on the last video. I know at the minute it's only small, but it is still massively valued. I still want to keep on growing this channel in the way that I hopefully can. I've been waiting this week for confirmed news rather than going live with what basically seems like confirmed news but isn't quite over the line as of yet. So anyway, I'm going to stop waffling. Let's talk about Tarek Muharemovic. That's how I'm pronouncing it anyway. When he comes in, we're going to be calling him Tarek, right? It's just going to be Tarek. So let's. I thought it'd be really interesting to kind of have a look over his overall stats and maybe have a little bit of a comparison to Pascal Struijk, who obviously is going to be his direct replacement. Now, Tarek Muharemovic, we're just going to call him Tarek for the rest of the show, was on international duty with Bosnia, so we got the opportunity to see him firsthand. So I wasn't aware of the links at the time of really watching him, but he was, along with the young lad who was playing in midfield, Bosnia's standout player from the tournament. His reputation was very high. He's obviously come through at Juventus. Well, he's not come through at Juventus, but Juventus took an opportunity with him early and then sold him to Sassuolo with an option for a 50% sell-on. And as it happened, Juventus actually wanted to sign him back this summer and make him part of their first team, but they weren't prepared to pay the fee necessary to bring him back. So what's then ended up happening is he's been made available to transfer to the world stage, and Leeds United have got ahead of some serious competition in Sunderland, Bournemouth were both interested, and it looks like Leeds United have stolen a match on them both after coming in with later interest, which I think is even more interesting. The not going to say bigger teams, but the probably more established Premier League teams, successful teams with European football, were both ahead of the queue, and Leeds United have been able to steal a match on Tarek and get it in the head there. Now look, we've had to burst the banks, if you like. He's going to become our record transfer fee at £34 million, so around 40 million euros, which then gives Juventus the amount that they want out of this transfer, along with Sassuolo getting their 20 million or whatever. Now, from the kind of reports and press release, he's following a similar kind of pattern in progression to Dan Huijsen, who ended up going to Real Madrid from Bournemouth. He's left-footed, he's quick, he's established, he's composed. All the footage that I've been able to kind of get of Tarek, to be able to see that he's very, very composed under pressure, and the stats kind of back up his defensive resilience. So I'm just going to flash some stats up on screen. If you just give me 1 second, I should have had this ready when we went live, so I do apologise around that. Let's get window capture. We will get stats. There we go. I'm almost seamless. I'm getting pretty good at this kind of stuff. So also, if you are watching, please do like the video, please do subscribe to the channel. The more support that I get, please drop comments in there as well. The more likely I am to do even more. I can't lie, it does drive me on to do even more content. So yes, Tarik's defensive stats. Now obviously I'm looking over here at the second screen. I can't see the small one in front of me here. Hopefully you guys can all see that well. The stats that kind of jump off the page for me, obviously, are the dead obvious defensive stats. Clearances, shots blocked, are massive stats for a defender, obviously. Up in the 98th percentile for both clearances and shots blocked, and in the 94th percentile for interceptions. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm going to make sure that I'm trying to be balanced in this debate between him and Pascal, because I have obviously had my issues with Pascal, but I do recognise the fact that he has got certain positives as well that we're going to struggle to replace. I'm happy to kind of admit that. So let's just have a look at the clearances and the shots blocked in comparison to start with. 98th percentile for both, on average 7 clearances per game and just over 1.05, so just over 1 shots blocked. It's a difficult stat to put something on is a shots blocked, because you don't expect to be blocking too many shots. Hopefully the tackle has already been put in there. But if I compare it with Pascal Struijk, you can see straight away off the page there's a big difference. You know, Pascal Struijk was down in the 82nd percentile for shots blocked, and the clearances was over 1 clearance less per game. Now Sassuolo are a very similar sized team in Premier League perspective in the Serie A. They finished 11th last season. They were recently promoted from Serie B, exactly the same. They stayed up last season, just like Leeds United did. So this is they're a good comparison in terms of then the pressure that they were going to be under. Now obviously it's a completely different league, but the Serie A is still one of the top leagues in the world, and he was still in a team that were considered that were going to have to struggle this season. So shots blocked, obviously Pascal was a much lower result. Dribbles passed. Now I want to talk about this dribbles passed one, because this is an area that I had an issue with Pascal. Not so much last season, but previously. I think about the game against Spurs at Ellen Road was a big one for Pascal in terms of dribbles being passed. It's just one that instantly comes to my mind. Last season, Tarik was dribbled past only 9 times in the whole season. Now the percentage for this is a little bit skewed, because obviously you've got other players that will have been dribbled past far less, i.e. attackers, etc. But he was only dribbled past 9 times in the whole of the season. By comparison, Pascal was dribbled past 14 times. Now 14 times is still not horrendous, but when you compare it, it's still nearly 50% more. Well, it's more than 50% more. So this stood out off the page for me. 64th percentile for Pascal. Interceptions. We're going to just talk positives first, and then we'll come on to the negatives. Interceptions. Now, looking at our new boy Tarik, interceptions over the season, 46 interceptions, over 1 point, just under 1.5 per game. 94th percentile for Tarik. By contrast, by comparison, Pascal Struijk was under 1 interception per game at 32 in the 69th percentile. This is a massive difference, and again this was a huge issue for me with Pascal. His concentration levels and just being in that right place at the right time wasn't always where it needed to be. So I think this is a huge upgrade when it comes to his reading of the game, his composure and his concentration. The biggest issue with Pascal Struijk was always concentration and recovery speed. He wasn't the quickest, but that was exposed by the fact that he wasn't always switched on. Whereas, based on what we can see from here, Tarik clearly is. Now, let's talk about aerial duels. Pascal Struijk is very good in the air. That is absolutely the case. Pascal Struijk is very good in the air. Now, last season he didn't score any goals, which is really surprising, because previous to that he was always pretty lethal in the opposition box. So it was a bit of a disappointment from Brendan. I'm reading Brendan Aaronson's name on the screen there. From Pascal last season. Aerial Aerial duels won defensively, very, very good for Pascal. You cannot overlook that, you cannot sugarcoat it. Over 3 aerial duels won per game, whereas Tarek was down at 2.06, 65 in total against Pascal's 105. Now, the only thing that I will say with this is you don't know from the face of the stat whether he's the player that's going up to win them aerial duels or somebody else within the team is assigned to do that. For Leeds United, Pascal Struijk is assigned to be the one that meets the first contact from the long balls. That is his job within the team. It's not really, it was never really Yaka or Joe Rodon that would be expected to meet that first contact. That's how I always see the back line, because Pascal's very good in the air. So you don't know if the same applies to Tarek in that area of the defensive responsibility. Ground duels won, I think, is a really interesting one, because this looks really low, and I would be concerned that this is going to be an issue. The ground duels to ground duels won is both really low. Now, again, certain stats can look certain ways, but if you compare that to Pascal was expected to do a lot of defending in the ground duels area, nearly a third more, nearly 100 ground duels more than Tarek, and he won over 3 more per game. Now, again, this can skew the statistic because he's had 100 less ground duels as Tarek, and then because of that, or partly because of that, he's been involved in winning 3 less. Okay, so that's not a huge surprise to me that there's a difference in there. Obviously, the ground duels won, it's around 1 per game, but when you actually think of the fact that he's had 100 less ground duels, that's not a huge surprise. So how much can we really read from that? Tackles, let's just have a look quickly at Tarek. 1.36 per game, 43 over the total season, 39 for Pascal, 1.2. Very similar statistics. And goals conceded, Tarek slightly more over Pascal, but again, I wouldn't apply too much to that because that's a team effort, right, for both sides. So look, they're comparable in certain ways, and there's certain things to like from Tarek. I personally think let's just quickly move on to the passing stats, because for me, passing for both of them, I've seen a lot of footage from Tarek that I like his passing range, but you cannot argue with Pascal's passing stats when you're bringing it up just on a screen like this. From what I see with my own eye, I was never a huge fan of Pascal Struijk's passing and distribution. I used to think that he put his teammates under a lot of pressure. It was always either a bit of a stretch for the receiver, or it would be going into the channels and the attacker would be forced to run it out of play. The footage that I've seen from Tarek has all been really positive. The flight of the ball chipped into the channels is realistic for his teammate to be able to run onto. I didn't always feel like that was the case with Pascal Struijk. I know that the stats are probably leaning slightly in favour of Pascal. How much of them were sideways passes, how many of them, were more pat stadding. And again, I'm aware of the fact that I'm not always going to be completely straight, because I can't. No, that's not true, because I am always straight. This is the way that I see it, but I know I've got a biased opinion towards Pascal. That's the way that my mind sees his stats. So then I'm always going to kind of spin it a certain way. So look, I get it. They're comparable. I think both boys are comparable. The pass completion rates are separated by 3%. It's neither here nor there. The stat that kind of jumped off the page for me when I was looking at this was Tarek's expected assists. Bear in mind that he's a centre back. Was 4.75, which was over double the amount of assists that he ended up getting. Even though Pascal was expected to pass forward so often in a Leeds United shirt, his expected assists, even though he did way more, well, not way more, a couple of hundred passes more than Tarek, is still lower, which tells me that Tarek's accuracy is better going into the final third of the pitch for Leeds United. So I just think it's a super interesting comparison. I think, you can only tell so much from stats. I'm really excited by this signing. I didn't know a huge amount of Tarek before I started researching for this video. I like what we see. I really, really like him. He's a big, towering presence. He's left-footed. This is the kind of signing that Leeds United fans, I think, expected a year ago in terms of the transfer fee. We've been brave. We've gone ahead and made the move of which we need to. There's so much potential resale value there. You know, we know of the interest that was already in him. If he has a good season, good 2 seasons, he could be moving to a Real Madrid, back to Juventus, whoever, for double, triple the money. You know, centre backs don't usually go for 90 million, but you get the point. 70, 80 million. You know, the going rate now for a transfer is 35, 40 million. We're in that kind of market now, and there's a safety behind his potential resale value there. So I mean, it's a great signing for Leeds United. Well done to the 49ers, well done to the club for kind of getting on this and making this happen. I'm expecting it to no doubt be announced today, because that's the way that these things always work when you then go and do a video. So well done Leeds United, I'm buzzing with this one. Let's move on. I want to talk very quickly about the... Oh, 1 second, let me just close the window capture down. This one. There we go. I want to talk very quickly about the pre-season testing video that came out from Leeds United. I did a short on this earlier, but I want to mention it again as well, because I think it's really important for Leeds United fans to really enjoy this group. The boys came back from their pre-season, they're from their vacations, their holidays, their off-season. Now, the World Cup players, they won't be back for another probably week or 2. I know in the video it was mentioned that Gabby was back next Monday. They get a little bit longer off, but all the players that had a full off season, they were expected back in yesterday. There was a few notable absentees from the footage, but most of the boys, I think, were all back in. And I think it was so important to recognise just how much they all wanted to see one another. They were absolutely buzzing to be back. They were absolutely buzzing to be in each other's company. You know, there were a genuine feeling of togetherness and excitement for them to be back, be in pre-season and get the season again underway. It feels like we've got a really great group that are in it together, and a team ethos that they're excited to be a part of. And I think it goes a long way into then again defending and backing Daniel Farke, because that starts with the management. It starts with the man at the top who's the manager. You know, it starts with Daniel Farke. So if ever we're in this position where we're like, oh, we need to evolve from Daniel Farke, don't forget what goes along with that, which is the team mentality, the building, the togetherness that has been generated over this last 3 years. It was so pleasing for me to see that, and it was nice to see Harry Wilson within the group as well. I'm so excited by this coming season, along with a few, you know, really good pieces of recruitment. Harry Wilson already in the door, Tarek, and among other names as well. I just think it was so good to see that video. So if you haven't watched that video as of yet, go and see it. I think it'll make you feel really positive. If you needed any positive reinforcement about this upcoming season, I think that video will give you just a little sprinkling of it. So yeah, I love to see it. It was great to see the boys back. I'm so excited by this coming season. Now, I'd be interested to kind of get your thoughts on what your expectations are for this coming season. You know, for me, I would be very, very happy with another season of just staying up, if I'm honest. I think establishing yourself in the Premier League can take way more than a year. It can take some teams 3, 4, 5 years. So if we can find ourselves in a situation where we're safe from relegation maybe 2 or 3 games earlier than we were this season, I'd be delighted with that, if I'm honest. And continue to see the football and the, you know, the togetherness, the determination to play for the badge, you know. Any other news in terms of recruitment? You know, we're hearing new rumours every day. We were linked with Mavropanos from West Ham this morning. Do I think we'll do another centre-back signing? I'm not so sure. I think it very much depends on the movement with Sebastian Bornau and you know, the options there. I don't think it matters too much of whether we play a 3 at the back or a 4 at the back, because I think ultimately we can chop and change. We do have different profiles within our squad that can fill in there should we need to, the likes of Ethan Ampadu, you know, if needed, especially with us looking like we're going to be signing a midfielder. Shea Charles, the noise around that sounds like it will be confirmed anytime. I'm surprised. I thought that one was going to go cold and we were going to move on, if I'm honest. I thought we'd look to hit other targets, but I think Shea Charles is playing a big role in that signing. I think he really wants the move to Ellen Road, so it's making us have a few more cards to play with Southampton, and Southampton have only got a year left on his deal, so they do need to look to move on that one pretty quickly, because otherwise the value will diminish. So I think that one's going to happen as well. I think we definitely will see another goalkeeper in pretty shortly. Lucas Perry was in the videos yesterday, as was Alex Kane, so we do at least have two goalkeepers that can do a job to a certain point. Lucas Perry, I don't believe Lucas Perry has Daniel Farke's confidence, and I think that's the big issue. I wouldn't be surprised to see us sign two goalkeepers, if I'm honest, and Lucas Perry to be moved on. I know that's the way that some fans would have us move. I know that's the way that other clubs would operate as well. I find myself sitting between building on the value of the player that you've bought and also being ruthless enough to just say, look, this hasn't worked. Our recruitment has been practically perfect, bar one or two here or there. Lucas Perry, I think he's been treated harshly, but I think he can still be registered in the very, very small column of failures so far. So if the club want to move him on, Daniel Farke doesn't have trust in him, he has to move him on. So I do understand the position the club find themselves in, but there was something about his footage in that video that was not alarming, but told me a few pictures, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he had very little interaction with the players in the main foyer, and we just saw Lucas Perry in the testing room. It'd be interesting to know whether he's kind of been let, you just go in that room there, Lucas, on your own. I don't know, maybe. That's what happens at football clubs. Players do get ostracised if they're not part of the plans. That's just the way football goes. So it's going to be interesting to see the movement on the goalkeeper front. Is James Trafford realistic? If we're in the ballpark of spending £30-40 million on players, maybe. Yeah, I think James Trafford will probably cost 40 million. Man City don't need to sell him. He's their number two. We know that they don't need to really worry about incoming transfers. He's English, homegrown quarter. He's actually come through Manchester City's academy. I don't know. I think it'd be a difficult deal to do unless he's just stood on with them and said, look, I need to leave. Be interesting. It's going to be an interesting one. It's gone a little bit cold on Suzuki, a little bit quiet there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we do. But I do think we definitely will sign at least one goalkeeper. It's just down to the profile. Will they risk Lucas Perry as being the number one again? I don't think so. So yeah, anyway, Leeds fans, thank you very much for sitting through the stream. Please do drop your comments, and afterwards I will respond to any that come in. Please like and subscribe the video as well. All your support really helps. I will continue to do at least one live stream a week, so hopefully you can capture it. I am going to try and make it on a regimented day, probably on a Tuesday. Just this week I've been waiting for the news to drop and confirmations to happen, but alas, they haven't come as of yet, so I just decided to do it today. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you all